Hello.
Oh.
You're listening to Higurashi here from the 2SER studios.
Yeah, this is weird.
Oh my goodness. So it's a balmy hot day.
Yeah.
And we decided that the best thing to do was to come into a studio that has air conditioning, unlike mine at home, seeing as we don't need to have the computer in front of us playing the Higurashi.
Sorry, I'm sure I'll add something for you guys in post, but yeah, I'm currently listening to the dulcet sounds, tones even, of my own voice and Felix's, obviously.
I mean, that happens in my setup as well.
But I like hearing the Higurashi. Anyway, it's fine.
Okay.
But yeah, we're here. We're at the recap. We finished everything. Are you happy now? Are you satisfied?
That's all right. They won't stop asking until we've done everything Ryukishi's ever published. And then once we've done everything Ryukishi's ever published, then it will be time to die.
Yeah.
There's no more to do.
Higurashi, and then the Higurashi Kai anime.
Oh, God.
And then Go, and then the console arcs, and then Outbreak, and then the other one that comes after Outbreak with the girl who is very racist.
I'm sure it's fine.
And then we'll have to read Iwaihime, and then we'll read the rewrite arc that Ryukishi did and nothing else.
Nothing else.
And you'll love it, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
And anyway, there's a whole bunch of other crap we have to do. But yeah, I don't know. In case you can't tell, I'm stumbling a little bit at the opening here because I'll let you know, I've been thinking pretty much since we started this show, since we started doing Higurashi, and even before doing Umineko, like what I want to say about Higurashi. And I feel like it's easier for me to use riddles and clues and hints rather than just
say it out loud.
Say how much this fucking stupid story about a couple of teenagers defeating a paramilitary corporation thing has changed my life. Like, it's so fucking difficult.
It's very silly.
It's incredibly silly.
I don't know.
But heartfelt.
I enjoyed the end of this story a lot.
Me too.
I think that as we were talking about, I think it was around part 17 or 18.
Okay.
When we were talking about how the sensibility of the story, what was left of it, was just thrown out when we got to arc 8.
Yeah.
And that means that the story has free reign to come in and just do it at once.
And just finish, basically.
And as long as you go in accepting that that's what it's going to do, I think it's totally fine. I think it's heaps of fun.
Yeah, I don't think that I've never had a conversation, at least with someone who didn't like this ending. There are people who don't like the cost-free ending that we end up with.
Yeah.
But I mean, my stance as always is that's the point. The point is that the kids play a different game to everybody else, and so there doesn't need to be a loser, and that's the point.
Yeah.
I did want to say, actually, before I forget, I think I like Hanyu more than I did before I read this arc.
Interesting.
Because my memory of her role in Arc 8 is that she basically does nothing and then she comes up at the end and then almost gets shot by a bullet but doesn't. And that's she's the MacGuffin ghost character. But she has a lot of scenes that either aren't in the anime or are given to Rika. Like the moment where Rika comes up out of the hole in the ground when they're in the secret tunnel in the Sonozaki mansion. That's kind of a Rika moment. Hanyu doesn't really do anything there, at least that I can remember. And also particularly her scene where Takano is having her breakdown moment. In the anime, she just shows up with a gun. She's like, "I'm gonna get you." I'm like, "Oh heck."
Oh no.
But in the novel, we have that lovely little scene with Hanyu talking to Takano, and she says that if you want to become a god, then shoot yourself. And I think that's at once kind of a shocking thing for Hanyu to say. And that's why I actually really like it. I like that showing more of her god persona. I think that's awesome. But also is highlighting the idea that in a similar way to the kids are playing a different game to everybody else, Takano's idea of what a god is not necessarily the same as what it actually is, Well,
yeah, one of the interesting things there is that clearly, this is the rounding point for Hanyu's progression through arc 7 and 8.
Yes.
Where she's had to learn to step in and do something.
And act, and she's not just a sideline person.
It's such a bizarre position for Ryukishi to put her in because on the one hand, she's clearly a kid.
Yeah.
She is like an analog for the other characters in the story and how they had to just step in and do the right thing. It's a concluding point for the thesis of the other arcs, which I think is fine, even though I think Arc 6 does it on its own all right.
Of course it does, but we won't talk about Arc 6 because then I'll just go on a rant of how great it is.
But the bizarre thing is that she's presented simultaneously as this character who is powerless in and of herself, but can act through others.
Yeah.
But then
she acts
also
through, like the faith of people.
Yeah. But then is also presented as this, powerful god being who works with other people's faith. And it just sits in this bizarre middle ground where she simultaneously has all and none of the power.
Well, you know what that is, Felix?
Yeah.
That's a kami is what that is. That's the Japanese interpretation of a spirit. I didn't really understand this and I still don't know that I can explain it properly, but I played this game, right? It's called Okami, where you play as a spirit.
Yeah.
You play as this badass wolf spirit who goes around killing demons and doing cool shit. But there are plenty of moments in the story where there's a human who wants to do something and it's only through your character supporting them and helping them to believe in themselves and their own innate ability that they're able to overcome those problems. And it's sort of a similar thing where in Japanese culture, and the idea of the spirit is that they are these all-powerful beings, but they, in a sense, they can't act without humans believing in them.
So what you're saying is that Japan invented the magic system for Warhammer 40,000?
Basically. That's basically what I'm saying. The God Emperor is a kami. It is a kami of humanity, a spirit of humanity, if you want to go that route, and I will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the point, I guess, that this kind of all comes around to for me is that moment earlier on in this arc where Hanyu has to tell Rika about what she forgot at the end of last arc.
Which is a weird scene, but yes.
It's like, oh goodness, Rika's terrible, tragic sacrifice of experiencing all that pain and she doesn't remember it. And it's a weird scene.
I don't like it, even in retrospect, because it doesn't really do anything. It leads to a moment where Hanyu has to say something, which I like. But she has plenty of other moments where Hanyu gets to act. She has a physical form. I feel like it's not super necessary. I'd rather just have cut out the middleman and said, "Yep, Rika remembers it," because this is the moment where Hanyu there's the spiritual energy or whatever. I don't know why it needs to be Hanyu physically telling her, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, the weird thing is, right, is that I think it works in that the scene is brief and it just goes, oh goodness, Rika, you've forgotten, here's what you've forgotten, and Hanyu realizes she needs to step in. That part of it is good.
I just think it's a bit silly.
The weird part of it is that we so dramatically sold the scene at the end of Arc 7 that ending it in that way makes it feel really flat.
Yeah.
And, you could say that perhaps that is the emotion that Ryukishi wants us to feel, that this is a tragedy, but we can overcome it.
Well, part of it is that there's still a chance that things could fail because Rika doesn't believe Hanyu and now Rika has to convince everyone else and it all comes back to that.
I don't think that's part of the...
You don't think so?
No.
Okay.
I think that it is part of the initial premise of that scene, but once the scene has begun, you're like, okay, no, she's going to believe Hanyu. That's fine.
Sure. Yeah, but yeah.
The weird thing to me in that moment is that, I think that the scene actually does a good job of kind of selling something that this story never got the chance to flesh out, which is the implications of the multiple worlds. Because, that scene then goes on, the following scenes then go on to talk about what happens after she dies. And there's kind of an unspoken background element there to say that, even though Hanyu remembers and has gone on to the next world, Rika in that other world is still there, dead, and her friends are experiencing the pain and the fallout of the disaster. So
I guess so. I would say that's already implied by the fact that we literally experience arcs 2 and 5 where Rika does die, and yet we're still following on.
100%. The story explores the implications, but I think that the specific aspect to those implications that it explores in this scene we're complaining about is something that Ryukishi didn't get a chance to flesh out in Higurashi, which is what is the expanded story once you get outside. How does Rika interacting with Akasaka in 1978 affect things as opposed to what happens in 1983? How does Keiichi giving that interview however many years in the future where he goes crazy and then the guy drowns in a boat accident or whatever?
Best scene.
all of that, I think, is a really interesting setup for something that Ryukishi never got to do, and he kind of leapt into it in that one scene, and then never got to finish the thought in Higurashi, and that's why it feels so weird to us.
I guess so. I don't know. I think that just because I've been exposed to so much other Higurashi media where they're like, and this is an alternate retelling of this thing about the world.
Yeah.
I'm kind of desensitized to it. I'm like, yeah, it's a multiverse. Like, I don't know. That doesn't matter to me so much anymore.
Yeah.
But I can appreciate your perspective on it. It's pretty cool.
I think ultimately, and obviously this is verging on Umineko spoilers.
Watch out.
Largely just because it's a thought that Ryukishi then gets to continue in his future stories that deal with repeating cycles, and that's just what Ryukishi does, so whatever.
Yes, rewrite. Indeed.
Plus respect. But man, other than that, I don't really have anything that I'd particularly complain about in Arc 8. It just built the energy and kept going in a way that Arc 7 was clearly trying to do but never succeeded.
Sure.
Because Arc 7 always keeps building the tension and then letting off for a little bit and going back up. And that never kind of gave you the breathing room that I felt the story needed. But Ryukishi tries the same thing here where the energy is always building and then there's never really a break on the train, but it still feels like a complete journey up that slope.
Sure.
When we get into Kasai having that entire thing with the shotgun and, we have the mention that he's shotgun Kasai and then it comes back around when we go down into the bunker later. That's great because even though we haven't had the moment to breathe between the shotgun Kasai setup and the shotgun Kasai payoff, it still has a lead up where we have the beginning and payoff. We have, Akasaka coming in and he punches one vehicle and you're like, wow, that's really cool. And then he punches another vehicle and it just keeps getting more and more ridiculous as the story goes on.
All the adult characters have, I would say, a lot of catching up to do to endear them to you, except for Oishi, obviously. Oishi is always endeared to us, but obviously the way that Ryukishi has written this story is in that style of a bunch of kids taking on stuff that they really shouldn't be taken on and learning dark secrets and Scooby-Doo gang, except with more murder. But he really has to spend a large part of Arc 8 endearing you to these adult characters in a way that's really tangible.
Yeah.
Even to people that don't read between the lines like we do. So Tomotahi gets his train moment and Akasaka punches vehicles and Kasai has a shotgun. Every character has usually a sensitive scene where we get to understand their hidden depths. I still feel like there is an argument that this arc is a little bit bloated just because it is long, but I don't feel like it ever lowered my experience. No. I don't feel like I was ever this is too many scenes. Every scene is enjoyable.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's anything that I would cut, for example.
Well, this is something that someone was saying in the comments, and we'll talk more about the comments in the post-edit recap once we've kind of gone through the whole arc, but it almost feels as though Arc 8 is two separate arcs that weren't strong enough to be two separate arcs, so they kind of got vaguely glued. And the reason that it still works is because they have enough of that this is part one, this is part two feeling to where it doesn't exhaust you with its duration because it feels like two different story beats.
Let's just say I'm glad that we took that break, even though she didn't tell us to.
Yep.
Because playing out everything after the Sonozaki Mansion in one go felt really good.
Yeah.
I think that was the correct choice in hindsight, even though it wasn't the pure option. I don't know. I feel like I should move on to some things that I didn't like so much. I have had some time to flesh out this thought, but where was Renna, Felix? This is my question. And I'm not just saying this as a fan of Renna, someone who would literally die for her.
No,
I am. But it's, how do I even explain this? My bias is obvious, but in an arc where almost everybody has something to do and almost even all of the teenage characters have a scene where they can do something. Renna doesn't get one.
Neither does Keiichi.
Neither does Keiichi. Those two characters in particular are lacking severely in screen time.
Here's the thing, and the reason I completely disagree with you on this is because they had their conclusion at the end of Arc 6. Doing something thorough with them in Arc 7 and 8 Like, you know, Keiichi
Look, I
obviously got
understand,
his bit in
but-
arc 7, okay?
Yep.
I think that
I was going to say.
Keiichi overstayed his welcome.
Keiichi gets a second bit and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Rena does not. Rena gets one bit in arc 6 and that's why it's the best arc. No questions, no arguments there. But
No, that's fine. I
would
agree
like
with that.
Good. I'm glad you agree with that. But I am disappointed from an objective point of view because Rena is literally hold on, let me get into this. This is real. Because Rena is literally the poster child of the series. She's on like half, probably more than half of the CD covers, jackets as they're sometimes called.
Man.
And she's on the cover. She's on the cover of Matsuru Bayashi. She's there with her arms out, like, I did it. I broke free of the cycle. But, like, she does nothing in this arc.
Okay.
She does nothing meaningful.
Ignoring the fact that the word objective's reputation has been tarnished forever on this show,
I don't know what you talk about.
I think, Ben, I think that you are right in that it would have been good to get a bit of spotlight on Rena in the same way that Keiichi got in arc 7. But I think that Rena having her final moment, even though it is told through Keiichi in arc 6, and then Keiichi having his kind of final push in arc 7, gives way to what makes arc 8 good. I do not have the faith in arc 8 Higurashi to have written those characters an extension on their story without fucking up the finality of the previous arcs.
Well, this is the thing. You're saying that because her story like ended in arc 6, then we don't need to continue it, which I agree with. I think that what you're saying is fine. But as like the main character in like several respects, in that it's Ryugashi's baby child and she's like on all the posters and she is my favorite. Like, I just don't know why he doesn't give her anything. Like, Sadako doesn't, let's be clear, Sadako doesn't even get a proper continuation of her story.
No.
She gets a silly trap scene, which is fantastic.
It is a good scene.
Why couldn't Rena get something like that? Why was she left by the wayside, Ryugashi?
Well,
tell me, Ryugashi, I know you're listening.
Sadako did kind of have her conclusion through the ending of arc 7 and then through the
flashbacks.
The fragments.
Yeah, the fragments.
It's not quite as final, so I can back you on that. But let's put it in language that I know that you will understand, Ben. But if you're not in the know, you and the audience might be a little bewildered by this one.
This is terrible.
Let's say you're GMing a Dungeons and Dragons
I'm done
campaign.
with it. Yeah,
and you have a character who is like your insert character, because you know every GM, when you're playing a tabletop role playing game, you know, normally your players have characters and you control the rest of the world. But I think most people who play that GM role where they control the rest of the world will still have a character that's kind of like theirs, in quotations.
Never.
And the problem is if you have that character and you overuse them, it starts to stomp on the rest of the party. And I think that using
this isn't
more
a
of
story.
Rena,
this isn't a story with like one GM and a bunch of players. This is just a GM on their own. I think it's fine to be like, this is my favorite character. I'm going to give them a moment in my like 40-hour-long finale scene. Like, are you telling me that your favorite character does not make an appearance of any kind, even an implicated one, in your like campaign finale? That doesn't happen with you?
No, I didn't. My last campaign I wrapped up, I killed him off before we got to the finale.
Well, that's a different thing though. Rena is not dead. Rena has not been killed by the game master Higurashi, the monster.
I don't know. I don't have a problem with it. I understand your complaint, but I think that you would have experienced more pain by Ryugashi screwing it up than you do by the absence.
Look, I think it's fine. Here's the thing. I don't like, this isn't a complaint I'm making to be like, God, Matsuru Bayashi sucks. I love it. But it's just one of those,
beginning this segment with, I should talk about something I don't like.
But like, I am disappointed to not see some Rena in the final scene as, you know, as an unashamed, unabashed Rena lover, to not see her like have a moment.
Yeah.
It does make arc 6 all the sweeter, but I am more conscious than ever of the fact that the last time I went to like rewatch the anime, I just watched the end of arc 6 and then stopped, like, which is the end of season 1, obviously. I mean, not the last time, but the time before that.
I was gonna say,
Sorry,
like,
let me be clear.
Reason you haven't watched past that is because
the last time I watched it on my own, I like watched the first 6 arcs, was like, yeah, there goes Rena and Keiichi, they're the best. And then I don't think I ended up moving on to the second season, which is partly the anime's fault. But anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. I think
it's just something we can agree to disagree
on. The flip side of that, though, I was very impressed with how Ryugashi wrapped up Ueshi's arc.
Ueshi, yes. No complaints there.
I figured that as a side character, effectively, he had his moment with that thing at the end. Because like that moment when he barged into the house
Arc 7,
at the end of Arc 7.
Well, he doesn't barge in. He calls the cops to,
and then it shows up in his car.
Ah, yes, the police were there the whole time.
Yeah.
Taps nose.
Like,
good thing they were so
that
close.
That was
wink,
such
wink.
a good point. If Ueshi had not appeared in the story from then on, I would have been fine with it.
I wouldn't have.
But like,
I would have thrown down.
The entire scene, when he goes to his friend's grave and the Sonozakis are there, and he like realizes what's actually going on.
Yep.
And he goes from being the like moral guidepost of the story to kind of being dragged around by the moral guidepost.
Well, that's the thing, right? Is that his arc is that he's arc after arc.
Yeah.
That's a bad word to use.
Terrible.
After his story progression ends, his character progression, there we go. After his character progression ends through arc after arc, he's always been trying to find the truth. That's like his whole thing. He's like, I am trying to find the person who killed my best friend in the whole world so that I can enact righteous vengeance on them. And then he never does. He never finds out the truth because he's always looking in the wrong direction. And so for the place that he's looking to come and tell him and for him to believe them and be like, I guess you didn't do it. Like, I guess you actually didn't kill him at all. I love that. I love that he like learns to trust the people that he once hated, and then he could be even goofier for the finale.
Yeah, great. To me, Ueshi, as well as just being the best character in the entire story, was easily the best part of this arc as well.
Interesting.
Because like every time there was a moment that I felt excited for, it was an Ueshi moment. Like the one where they show up on the shrine grounds and he comes out of nowhere laughing.
He's in the shadows.
I mean, you guys would have seen it. I lost my fucking mind.
Yeah.
It was so good. Then, the entire sequence in the bar, despite being an absolute mess with like the fact that the old man from forensics wasn't really declared to be there until like 7/8 of the way through the scene.
It's fine. He's not important. Okay, it doesn't matter.
But he became important. That's the problem.
Whatever, it's fine. But Ueshi's important, and so is Kuma-chan, which is the main thing.
I thought it was like, it was really good how he had his moment, like more than he really needed to shine. And despite what I was saying about Ryukishi potentially fucking up Rena if she had more time to shine.
Here we go.
He doesn't fuck up Ueshi. Like, so I'll concede that. I'll concede that.
You'll concede your entire point. Good.
I will concede my entire point. But I still think that playing it safe was the better thing to do.
Okay, whatever, dude.
My reasoning is still intact, but my reasoning is undermined by Ryukishi's execution. That's okay. I'll concede that.
It's terrible. But if it was anybody else that was, writing the story, then they definitely should have put Rena in.
No.
Is what you're trying to say.
No. Everyone other than Ryukishi would have done a worse job.
Okay.
Ryukishi's a madman. There is no one that can do what Ryukishi does.
I mean, he admitted, like, I've talked about this before, but he admitted that the ending to the story was childish. And he even says in the story that the ending was childish and a fantasy and kind of stupid.
Like, I got to say, guys, I mean, it's not like I am the most well-read mystery reader on the planet.
You might as well be.
I am far from that. I mean, listen, Craig Sisterton's probably close to that title, and there was another book reviewer from the UK who we were talking about with Craig, who's probably got even more than he does. But I've been doing a lot of stuff with Japanese authors as we prepare for the next season of Death of the Reader, which should be ongoing when this comes out. And
hopefully,
God, just like there's no one else I've seen at all like Ryukishi.
I'm curious in what respect specifically you mean, but I would agree.
he can't write in the conventional sense.
So hold on, he can't write. Full stop. No.
He can't write in the conventional sense in that, like, I think his command of language is, at least when translated, mediocre at best.
Yeah.
He doesn't have confidence in the way that he says his sentences, so he says them over again and undermines how good it was the first time. It's a mess. Like, Ryukishi repeats himself. We've done the meme, okay?
Yep.
But in terms of the style of story he constructs and the way that he goes about weaving character drama through it is, like, just unrivaled in everything else I've read in around the entire world of mystery fiction.
I think to me it's always about how hard he commits.
Yeah.
Like, you can tell that the ending of Matsuri Bayashi was like what he wanted from the beginning. And such a big draw of Higurashi is like the blend between horror and slice of life, between tragedy and hope and da-da-da-da. And I think that most like most like well-acclaimed stories that I would pull off the top of my head have like tragic endings, like classics. So for him to say, no, fuck that, I'm not going to give this a tragic ending because that's like the artsy thing to do. I think it would have been, if he'd said, no, actually Rika falls into a coma, she can't defeat fate. And it's really a story about how you can't escape death or whatever. And that's like the metaphor, But that he turns it around and gives it a totally unabashed, unrestrained, completely upbeat, perfect ending, like even Oishi, who he doesn't even give like a super concrete justification for him still getting his retirement package, but it doesn't matter. And actually, I did want to mention something. I'm curious of your opinion on this. I was having a discussion with someone about Satoshi, who, as we all know, is Shion's on-again, off-again boyfriend, but not actually. And the discussion I was having was basically on whether or not when Satoshi wakes up, if they'll get together or not.
Doesn't matter.
I know, but it was an interesting discussion because this person was so adamant. They were like, they are not, they've never been together. There's no way. Like, why would that even happen? And then my like counter argument was, well, this is a story about characters like doing good things and being rewarded. Like Shion was rewarded with her like mistrust and paranoia, with death and the destruction of everything that she loved. And so if the story were to continue, like it's obvious to me that Satoshi and Shion would end up together, which I thought was like an interesting discussion. I don't know if you have a thought on that.
I agree with your general point that characters are rewarded for their actions, but it's at the same time, it's like, as I've said from the very beginning, these are a bunch of kids trying to figure out their feelings rather than people with like actual meaningful romance. Okay. So I don't put much stock in it either way.
Interesting. Yeah. I've only been thinking about it a lot because far too many of the Higurashi stories are explicitly about Shion and Shion's relationship with Satoshi, to the point that when the story ended, Dai, because I think she's just his favorite character, Dai like wrote a song that was like, this is when you'll wake up and I'll see your face and then I'll take care of you forever and it'll be the best. And I think it's like an interesting space for Higurashi to live in, especially given all of the extended universe, the Higurashi extended universe canon that exists.
Well, I mean, the important thing is clearly the question, right? Sure. It's more about that regardless of what happens, Shion still maintained the faith that Satoshi would one day come back. And that is the reward as I see it. That in fact her
mental state,
beloved, didn't actually just die horribly.
Yeah, she gets like closure of a sort.
I think that's the more important thing in that situation.
Sure, I would agree.
And it's just, I don't know. It's a bizarre thread to even chase down.
It's just one of those like mysteries in the fandom that I see pop up now and then, and especially as I say with all of this extra Higurashi stuff. I don't think, off the top of my head, I can't think of a story that explores like, but what if Satoshi and Shion got together at the end? Then what? Well, mostly because like that's the end of the story.
Well, yeah. I mean, the other thing is that like, I guess I like that open-endedness because it leans into the idea that Arc 8 delves into, that the world continues after Higurashi.
Sure, it does. It certainly does. We should play Higurashi sometime.
One of the shows that I've watched recently, it's by the same guy that directed Ex Machina, Alex Garland, I want to say. It's called Devs. It stars Nick Offerman, Alison Pill, Sonoya Mizuno, and fucking the show in a very Western way delves into the idea of multiple worlds and multiple timelines, but it's a very different approach on it. And I was very interesting to watch that show alongside the ending of Higurashi because it very much, I think, goes into what I like about the way Ryukashi does multiple worlds, where he doesn't answer the questions. Because once you pose the thesis of there are multiple instances, multiple time loops of this thing happening, unless you say this time loops X many times and we witness it for exactly that many times, there is always the possibility that something more we don't see happens.
Sure.
And like, there's obviously the curatorial decision of picking and choosing which ones we get to see, which is the entire thing of Rika's like 1,000 years, right? Is that we only get to see the ones that matter in quotations.
She implies that she's seen Keiichi go crazy X amount of times, and Rena, she's seen the school blow up a bunch of times, and Shion go on a massacre rampage. But we only get to see one or two of those specific loops.
Yeah.
Because it's it's an example, right? It's an example of that time that Rikushi is showing us.
Yeah, and there's something really interesting to me about the fact that the community for the entire time I've been engaged with it is always talking about what happens either side of the time loop and never what's within the time loop. And the reason that's really interesting to me is because it is kind of implied that within the time loop is infinite.
Yep, more or less.
Anything could have happened. Like, and there's something really fascinating about how Ryukishi explores that thesis without making the scale of it feel overwhelming.
Yeah, I mean, Rika says it's been, 100 years, but 100 years is more of a metaphor. If somebody says they've been waiting for 1,000 years, that's more of a metaphor than anything else, that sort of thing. But yeah, I don't know. I don't find this quite as fascinating as you do because I've been around in the fandom for however many tens of years, too long. But I will say when I finished the story, I was absolutely enthralled with the idea of basically writing your own stories. I'm going to bring it up again. My play, that I made back in year 12 for my final project in theater was kind of inspired by that concept. I thought, I could construct a scenario, only 5 minutes of one, not much time, but I could construct a scenario where Rena goes to Keiichi's house on her own and then Mion discovers it later. That sounds like something I could posit as something that happened in one of the time loops.
Yeah.
So that idea that anything is possible within the time loop is definitely something that's been on my mind, and I'm fascinated by time loop stories. They're one of my favorites. It's why whenever a video game in particular is this is actually a time looping story or a game about multiple realities or whatever, I'm sign me the fuck up. It is my single favorite trope in any story. That said, I have experienced one instance of a story that was a bit too explicit with the amount of times that things have looped. Yeah. It's called Endless 8. It's part of the Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya story. And what they did, Felix, have you heard about this?
I've only heard the title. That's
basically what they did, they're adapting from either a light novel or a manga or whatever, but the premise is that because the main characters aren't completing their summer break correctly, God is making time loop infinitely until they fulfill her wish of a perfect summer break. And so each time loop is them trying to figure out how they can fix it and also discovering it and that sort of thing. But the way that the director decided to represent this was to have 8 anime episodes, each of which shows this not just the same period of time, but the same scenes over and over, the same lines of dialogue most of the time, but he told the animators to draw everything differently. So the characters have different outfits and different camera angles, but it still is telling the same exact story with the same beats for technically 7.5 episodes before they wrap the story arc up. But it is such an abysmal watch, and I get that it's a way of trying to impress upon the audience the crushing feeling of going through a time loop.
Yeah.
But Ryukishi does this in a way where you can feel the crushing nature of the time loop without it just being boring.
I don't necessarily agree with that.
You're going to tell me that Ryukishi's writing is boring?
No.
Wait, what is your disagreement here?
I think that that sounds atrocious. Because,
it is atrocious.
Much in the same way that Ryukishi repeating himself is atrocious because it's yes, we know. The fact that it is important and you feel the need to repeat it to us does not change the importance of it.
Sure.
Right? If you had the confidence in what you said initially, it'd be fine. But the interesting thing there is that that's very much an art piece approach to telling a time loop story.
It is in
where
a sense.
This is the authenticity of the time loop. And I think something that Ryukishi does interestingly is that a lot of the time I feel he exposits in Higurashi how significant the time loop is. Rika and Hanyu are always just oh goodness, it's been thousands of repetitions. How terrible.
Oh my,
oh
dear. We sip some tea.
Here's some spicy kimchi, Hanyu.
Oh, not the spicy kimchi. Oh, woo. There we go.
But I think that something that he does that is better is that he shows how important each loop is.
Sure.
And so when they say there have been hundreds of these loops, you're oh, that would be exhausting.
Exactly. Right. You are already like downtrodden by each, like, these are all the different ways that things can fuck up.
Yeah.
Oh, you've experienced each of these individual fuck ups like 10 times? Oh, no, there's a big problem here.
I am being pedantic for a very particular reason here, which is that I think that Ryukishi doesn't sell the weight of the eternity very well. What he sells is the weight of the minutia that then makes the eternity hell.
I feel like we're splitting hairs a little bit.
100%. We are splitting hairs, but I want to unpack why it works properly, right?
Okay, sure. That's fine. That's
because you know, there are time loop stories that do it terribly. Like, weirdly enough, I feel like Groundhog Day, which is like the Western time loop story, is terrible at selling the significance of the time loop because, like,
well, it's not trying to make it like completely emotionally crushing.
No,
it's more about the character's boredom than anything else.
Right?
My favorite line. Sorry, I'm cutting you off, but I need to tell you, my favorite line in that whole movie is when he's throwing cards into a hat with the girl he likes. I don't remember any of their names. It doesn't matter. But he's throwing cards into a hat and she's like, wow, when'd you learn to like throw cards that good? She's like, well, you practice once a day for 10,000 days and you're all about, like he gives a specific number and you're like, oh, no.
Yeah.
Like he's been doing that many times. That's a problem.
Yeah. But like Groundhog is an interesting case there because I think it works really well at doing something that a lot of time loop stories don't really do, which is making it feel light, but just telling you how horrible it is.
Yeah.
And so I think, like, to my mind, of those three, we've got like the authenticity and like draggingness of it. Then we've got the individual weight while not selling how much it drags. And then we have just doing neither in Groundhog Day and just letting you accept that it's horrible.
I mean, obviously the quirk, I suppose, of Groundhog Day is that, you know, when he starts trying to kill himself, it's portrayed as a comedy montage.
Yes.
Right? Like, death is a joke in that movie. Even though we're supposed to understand that it's horrible for him, we're not necessarily supposed to I don't know if empathize is the right word.
It's dark
We're
humor,
supposed to
right?
empathize, but like we're not supposed to like feel miserable about it. It's not like, oh no, he's trapped here for an eternity. It's like, no, he'll get out,
like we never deal with how much
somehow.
pain his various attempts at death have caused him. It's just, oh look, it's a montage.
Oh look, he's dropping the one where like he comes down, like grabs the toast, unplugs it from the wall, and they just like watch him like trudge up the stairs, and then you hear the psk as he like drops in the bathtub.
Anyway. After all of this, the one I wanted to sell, the one I wanted to talk about, Takano.
Okay.
What
about her?
I don't know. That's the thing.
You don't know? You don't like it? You don't like the fact that the way that Ryukishi tries to humanize her at the last minute?
I think that the way that he humanizes her is fine. It's just so interesting to me that after so many incredibly compelling character arcs and well-told stories, Takano analytically seems fine. I don't have a problem with how she's told, but when we got to that concluding scene, like, I didn't respond to it in any way.
What, you mean when she's trying to shoot the club members? Or when she's, you didn't respond to that?
Like, I think the interesting thing is that Ryukishi having gone full hog on the childish story was a good idea for the entirety of the arc, but completely undermined the actual threat and tragedy of Takano's story. There's a weird juxtaposition there. Right? Totally. Like, there's a weird juxtaposition in that I think that her story is tragic. I think that it's implicitly well told, but it just feels out of place in Arc 8 as a whole, because the whole thing is, and here's something I do think works about it, right? Is that Takano has been so obviously the villain since the very beginning, right? In any other murder mystery, if there was any other option, you would have said, oh, she's too obvious to be the villain, right? And that's something that we've seen dozens of times, right? There's always the really obvious, underworld tied character, and you're like, okay,
thug. They talk like this, like, hey, I'm gonna break some legs. But they're never the killer. Never. They're just a small-time thug.
But there's something really bizarre about Takano in that she's so obvious that by putting her reveal at the crazy scene at the end of Arc 7, and then humanizing it with the beginning of arc 8 and then just making it so unbelievably ridiculous at the end of arc 8 that it kind of masks how bad she was as a mystery.
I guess. I don't know. I don't know. I guess so. I don't know. I don't really know what she's trying to pull for here. I feel like I guess.
Well, that's the thing. That's my entire reaction to Takano this entire arc is I'm like, does this work? I guess.
Like I don't really care. The thing is, I think my response, my like formal official response to this podium here is I don't think the mystery matters anymore.
No, it doesn't.
That's literally all I can tell you. Like it's arc 8. It's like we already know all the answers. So why would you care about Takano's mystery when we've finished arc? Like we're in arc 8. We already know everything.
Yeah.
You know?
No, it's like in so many ways, it makes sense to me that in a story about friendship and the power of working
redeeming
as a group,
people,
and that one,
yeah,
that like the villain who was really obvious and conspiring behind the scenes doesn't actually matter that much. I think that makes a lot of sense. It's just it just sits so weird with me, and I don't know how to unravel it.
Yeah.
And like,
I don't know. I think that she serves the story well as like justifying all the weird shit that happens in other arcs, because like she obviously wanted to like have like vans that follow people around and cops that come to shoot school kids and stuff like that. Like I enjoy that.
Well,
and also arc 7's finale, which I still really enjoy. I still think that's like a really fun final scene. I appreciate that she's there for those reasons, but like, I guess like she's not super strong as a mystery villain.
No. Like if we look at some of the other stories we've covered on like Death of the Reader, for example, like the Honjin murder case, great beginning, ending fell completely flat. Sayonara Slam, fantastic book, but the mystery did not live up to any of the other aspects of that story. And here, I feel like Takano in the earlier arcs sets up a mystery that is like very obvious, but the pieces of the puzzle very well obfuscated from you. Like the bit about her father, like I picked up on it, but
I'll shush you. Like you and your genius brain.
But like, as far as I can think, that's the only one that really is there aside from like the general potential military conspiracy.
Yeah,
there's like the two details.
You're not gonna like pick apart all of Takano's motivation, her situation, and like what's going on with Tomitaki and all that sort of thing.
Yeah,
and fucking Nomura, like. All this, like, you're not going to figure all this stuff out just from reading the first 7 and a bit arcs, you know, like it's stuff that Ryukishi just wants to kind of tell you at the end. It's he's reading from his character Bible.
Yeah. And it's so strange because I think it's on so many levels really bad and so many levels really good and not many levels very mediocre, but I just don't feel strongly about it.
Look, here's the thing. I don't think that like when I tell people about Higurashi, I don't lead it with it's a mystery.
Well, that's why we never did it first, right? There is no way I would have survived this story if we hadn't done Umineko.
But I don't think that like, I mean, look, we've read Umineko. Ryukishi was not interested in like creating a strictly murder mystery until after he'd finished Higurashi, and then he wanted to kind of go back and like unpack those feelings. That's like his whole thing with the stories he's written since. He always writes reactively to the stuff that he's previously finished, and I just don't think that he cared about making it a murder mystery. At least like it wasn't a conscious thing. You know. I don't think it matters in that sense. There is mystery and there's a villain and there's like murder, but it's not really a murder mystery.
No, I think broadly to conclude the point, I just I'm surprised that I don't know both what I meant to feel and what I do feel about Takano. She's just kind of this weird gray area that is kind of a lot. Like, I guess I feel about Takano's character arc conclusion the same way that perhaps the person you were talking about, Shion, with earlier, felt about that plot point being open. It just feels unfinished.
Yeah. So before we jump into Umineko spoilers, because I want to make sure this is like part of the actual video, I want to very briefly touch on like fuck, I hate this. Like how Higurashi has actually changed my life. Because I've been speaking in pretty broad terms.
Where's my tea? Let me
I've talked, I mean,
pull up a chair.
I don't know how long I'm going to take.
Sit
but
down.
I've talked
pull
about,
out my notebook.
you know, some of the problems. You could be a psychologist for me.
Exactly. I don't have a lounge in here.
The problem is that you're two shitty friends. That's right. I could have told you that one for free. Yeah, but like, I mean, literally that's like part of the problem that I've always like had trouble valuing myself properly. And so a lot of the friends that I've kind of had mostly through school life, I think I'm okay since moving into uni, but they've been shitty. And so Higurashi was a big part of like learning to value myself and like find friends that will support me and be nice to me and not be friends when I'm alone with them and then kick the shit out of me when I'm with other people. That's good stuff. Those are fun memories. But one of the big problems that I kind of had mentally as I was wrapping up my IB, my International Baccalaureate in Year 12, was that one of these shitty friends of mine was basically saying that because he's a nerd, right? The guy, I had a group of friends who were a bunch of nerd friends, you know, the cliquey nonsense. And I thought, you know, I'm a smart guy and I like computers, so I should be with the nerd friends. That makes sense. But then I started hanging out with some of the like, how do I even explain it? Like troublemaking, like popular people. And I thought, this doesn't make any sense. How can I be like one day hanging out with the nerd crew and then the other day hanging out with the popular crew? That's weird. And I kind of justify it as just like, well, it's kind of nice to be able to hang out with a bunch of different people. But this friend, this like shitty, toxic friend, basically like called me out on it. He was like, it's like you're two completely different people. How do I know I can trust you? And like I can't properly tell you how like emotionally devastating it was to have someone who I thought was like my best friend tell me that they were disgusted by me because I was like hanging out with someone else.
Yeah.
In retrospect, it was awful and controlling, and I'm glad I don't see them anymore. But it was like a genuine question that I had, and especially being a neurodivergent person who doesn't understand social shit very well without having to like manually learn it and like engrave that stuff in my brain, it's always been really hard for me. And so Higurashi, like more than teaching me about communication and friendship and kindness, the thing that it taught me above all else is that when you meet someone and they act one way and then you see them again and they act another way, you shouldn't be so shocked. You know, I used to have this reaction of like, oh, I'm seeing this person's true self, or like I'm uncovering the real them. But like throughout the story, we meet so many characters who are the most lovely people in the world, but also are capable of murder and also can be really vindictive and shitty. And like, I don't know how to explain it properly, but like Takano and Rena and Keiichi and Oishi, like all of these characters have so many different nuanced sides to them. And this story was the first story that I ever sort of read that really made me understand that that's a natural thing. I'm sure a psychologist would have a field day with this, but like ever since then, I've learned to kind of understand people through understanding stories. So now that I understand that like Takano is driven to do these awful, horrible things because they had a shitty childhood, like I understand that now. I understand that principle. Like I might have said it before, people might have told me that before, but Higurashi was the first story that really made me understand that principle by like showing me what is a facsimile of a real life example of that. So I don't know. I guess I just want to say, if you also have like learned something from Higurashi, it doesn't have to be specifically that. It could be the broader question or the broader moral of communication is key, which is a really simple thing to learn, but it's core of Higurashi. Or if it's something more nuanced, if it's something that is very personal to you, that's cool, and I respect that. And I wouldn't be here, and I use that term in all senses of the word. I definitely wouldn't be here if not for Higurashi. So I'm very thankful to Higurashi for showing me and like effectively teaching me how to value people for who they are in all respects, in all ways that they might show themselves to you or in a formal setting or to their parents or whatever. Higurashi really taught me how to understand people. And that's been such a huge part of just, you know, becoming a proper human being who can function in society. So that's great. Anyway, now I think I'm done being a sap unless you have anything you want to comment on that.
I feel that would be very ill-advised of me.
I guess so. Much in the same way you wouldn't put Renner into the final arc.
Exactly.
Higurashi. You wouldn't comment on anything I said.
No, I wouldn't dare. Umineko.
Do you want to jump over now? All right, thanks for listening to my thoughts and feelings. Let's talk about Umineko.
Sure.
Let's go full spoilers.
Yeah, full spoilers from now. So if you haven't read Umineko, be gone. I think the main thing, now that we're at the end here, Hertz,
What main thing?
I appreciate Umineko so much more having seen
What angle are you going to take here? Is it because the themes complement each other so well, or is it because Rikishi's writing has gotten so much better?
Both. I think the other thing is that, like, Umineko feels like more of a finished thought now that I have seen the beginning of the thoughts that happened in Higurashi. Like, all of the characters that got re-rolled and bundled up and put into Umineko now,
X-Speed, yeah.
they feel more complete now that I've seen the context for it, and it'll be interesting to see with Kikonia coming out, like, how that happens again, because there aren't many things I feel in Umineko that are like unfinished questions.
No, it's a pretty final statement, right?
So, you know, where Higurashi very clearly had a lot of open threads and ideas that hadn't quite been explored, it's kind of curious to see Ryukishi expanding on the When They Cry franchise and how he will make sure that there is still that progression to the story. And if I will feel the same way about these two entries, Higurashi and Umineko, once that's come out.
Sure.
But
I was going to say, I always find it interesting thinking about how, because obviously if you read Umineko having read Higurashi and Burn comes along and you're like, man, she looks familiar. Hey, it's Rika. How you doing, Rika? Oh, she's being really shitty. Oh, no. Like, I feel like, I've said before that I feel like Burn is kind of a leftover of the feelings at the end of Higurashi that are left kind of unresolved. I stand by that. I
think I think I'd say the same, but I'd also expand on that and say that there's almost an implication to me in her appearance in Umineko that them escaping the endless torment never actually ended it. It was just the Rika in that world.
Well, that's where the discussion comes in, because Rika, post Metsurebayashi, clearly still has like the memories of all of the loops and everything. She doesn't forget it, but she does move on from it. Burn is, in my mind, just all of the feelings that Rika learns to resolve. Are in another sense they're being pushed somewhere else. And those feelings form the creature known as Burn Castle. That's like my personal interpretation of that.
The actor formerly known as.
Exactly. So all that shit that Rika like overcomes and learns to deal with is just somewhere else, and that forms a spirit of a sort. And I really like Burn's portrayal. Now it's time for you to read Umineko again to fully understand everything.
It'll never happen.
But like going through that, having read Higurashi and watching her do these awful things was really like shocking and horrifying. But I like the way that Ryukishi almost like criticizes and contradicts the lessons of Higurashi, because Burn's obviously going around being like, you can never, I will guarantee that there is never not going to be a happy ending as the Witch of Miracles. Like she's totally jealous and sick and tired of everybody else who like gets a happy ending but her. And with her being the leftover feelings of Rika, that just to me puts it in such a phenomenally strange light. No, I guess I just like that Ryukishi isn't afraid to challenge his own thoughts and feelings. And obviously that story ends in a way where those feelings are resolved. There is some sort of happy ending. But he's not, you know, he had the guts to go with a totally unashamed, unabashed happy ending, but then he's also totally willing to create a thesis statement on why that is maybe wrong, the wrong thing to do. And then, so to me, the decision that you make at the end of Umineko of like, do we believe in magic or mystery or whatever it was? You know, it's been too long. You know what I mean? Fucking Andrew's
Do we
choice.
believe in the magic mystery machine from Scooby-Doo?
That's the one. Like, do we believe in magic or not? Basically, like, to me, Higurashi is the ultimate yes, we believe in magic answer. And Anjay's shooting everyone on a stupid boat and driving away into the sunset is
best scene.
Rejecting Higurashi, rejecting everything that Ryukoshi ever believed in. And for him to put an ending to his sequel story in which a character just completely shits on that story, like, I love that. I love that he's able to write that. Because I feel like most sequel writers, they'll take, the ending of the first book and go, all right, well, now I have to build on that thesis and, like, maybe I examine a bit more closely, but we're mostly moving forward with that conclusion as premise for the next story. Whereas Umineko, much in the same way that it challenges you on its own mysteries, the concrete mysteries in the story, takes the premise that you have if you've read Higurashi and breaks it apart bit by bit and forces you to, like, re-examine that interpretation.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. I love it.
I completely agree. I think it's one of the magical things about a writer like Ryukoshi exploring his own ideas in what is effectively critical lens.
Exactly.
Like, a lot of authors will come along and try to justify what they've written. Not many will come along and undo what they've written. Which is
undo and redo.
Yeah. And I think that that's something very special about this franchise from, at least in the field of mystery from what I've read, is, there are authors like Edogawa Rampo who would, reuse tricks as a way to kind of do them better, which Ryukoshi definitely does. But I don't think that in redoing things, I've ever seen an author in quite the same way, undermine their own thesis intentionally.
Yeah.
And,
Could you imagine, this is thought popped into my head, could you imagine if Rika went and grabbed Takano, stuffed her in a barrel and set it on fire just to make sure she was dead?
Yep.
I can.
Completely plausible to me.
It's so awful.
After all of this,
yeah,
I just wish Ryukoshi had an editor. Like, these stories are so good in so many ways, but they are so hard to sell to ordinary people.
Yep.
Like, listen, all of you nerds out in the fucking audience, right? You guys, big geeks, big geek.
Big geek boys.
Reading your fucking visual novels and watching your goddamn anime.
Yeah.
How am I supposed to get my dad, having now finished the complete collection of Sherlock Holmes, to read this and get him to understand why it's so much better when he's going to get caught up halfway through the first club scene and say, this is ridiculous. Why am I reading this? This is for children.
Look, if he could get past the blatant racism and sexism of Sherlock Holmes stories, then we can get him past the club scenes.
Well, that's the difference between you nerds and ordinary people, is ordinary people look at racism and they go, oh, well, this is the days of the past. I'm glad we've come so far.
And anime has no racism in it.
None whatsoever, I'm sure.
Yeah, I've never seen any, so it's fine.
I don't even want to think about that point.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. Did you know that when you're trying to, like, portray a foreign person, it's like it's either blonde or red hair, and that's it. Like, you don't give a foreigner, like, any other color hair. Because that's just how you, like, show that someone's foreign. That's how it works.
You know something I found out this week, just on that note? It was really weird to me.
Is this going in the episode? What is this?
Yes, this is going in the episode.
Okay, sure.
This is a final point.
Okay, sure.
Did you know that Dark Souls doesn't have any Japanese language voice acting? It's always English.
That's very bizarre. I don't know, the Japanese like the way English sounds, so I guess if you don't have to, like, write... I mean, you do have to write those full sentences. There are a couple of characters who talk to you. I don't know. I don't know, dude. It's Japanese just like the way English sounds, and I guess they wanted to... Well, because they're imitating, like, Western RPGs, so I guess that makes sense.
Oh my goodness. Just all of the times every fucking Japanese author I've ever read who's just like, oh yes, it was a Western-style office, and this is the bad guy's place, because the West is evil.
That's how it works. It's always the foreigners.
Well, I don't know.
It's always the Chinaman.
Coming up in a matter of minutes will be the second and final recap for Higurashi.
God, I can't.
I'm going to say now, I don't expect us to go any further than this. We may do Saikuroshi,
I want to do Higurashi. I think that it's part of like bridging the gap between Higurashi and Umineko, even though it looks like Go is doing the same thing, which who fucking knows, whatever. I think we should read that, but everything else is up in the air. I'm not particularly enthralled.
I mean,
by
we will say
stuff.
so, and what will happen at the end of the next recap. But regardless, at what is effectively in my heart the end of this 3.5 year journey, thank you all for joining us.
Woo!
I cannot believe we made it this far.
I can. How many years has it been? 4?
3.5.
Yeah,
It'll be 4 by the time this comes out. It's currently January. This will probably be dropping sometime towards the middle of the year.
Now you've dated us.
Well, that's fine. Who knows? Maybe we'll have died from the coronavirus by then.
It's totally possible. That's right. We live in one of the sensible countries, so it's fine.
Pause for effect.
Oh no. Next time.